How to draft a civil complaint. Step 1 is draft your case headings. So review the About Case Headings PowerPoint for details. It's always a good idea to save the case heading as its own separate document within your digital case file because you're going to use it over and over, and this will save you from making an error and, say, mistyping a docket number. Whenever I open a new client file, I open a subfile for client admin, which includes the billings, initial case notes, client contact information, and client retainer agreement. And I open a second subfile that you see here labeled NOA, cover letter, and heading. The NOA is your notice of appearance, which is the document an attorney must file to say they're the legal representative of someone in a case. A template for the court cover letter that'll go with most of your filings, and the case heading. After the case heading, the next step is your introductory sentence. It's helpful to the court and to the other parties if you include an introductory sentence summarizing what the case is about, especially if it's a very long, couple 100-page complaint, which nothing will be that you will work with in this class. But regardless, it's nice to have a little summary. The one I've written here is the civil actions brought by independent barber Reginald Taylor against the Cut Rate Chair Company for breach of contract and damages relative to sale of 2 faulty, inoperative barber chairs. That just orients the courts and the parties as to what you're suing about. Section headings. Each of the counts, that is the individual legal claims set out in your complaint, should have a separate section heading, and your prayer for relief or request for your relief should also have its own heading. Different courts prefer different formats, but the norm is to center and underline each section heading. And the next slide is an example of your first few section headings, and the complaint that you draft should resemble these. You can see there we have the introduction sentence that we just stated, the jurisdiction and venue, what court this is going to be in and why they have the authority to hear it, and then a paragraph each on each of the parties. You'll notice that each of these paragraphs is numbered. All the paragraphs in a complaint need to be numbered, which raises an interesting logistical issue of making sure that that works appropriately. If you're good and skilled with those automatic numbering outline functions in Word, go ahead and use those if you're comfortable with them. Make sure they don't also number your subheadings. I personally don't get along with those automatic numbering outline functions because they've always turned into a nightmare for me when I start trying to move paragraphs around or insert an extra sentence in a paragraph. But if they work for you, that's great. I still follow a sort of old school method of waiting till the document is absolutely, completely, entirely done, and then go through and manually number the paragraphs. So any place where I refer to another paragraph, I've left a blank and or put a big X in red font so that I know to look for it and go back and fill in those numbers when I'm done. And then I have someone else check them for me. That way, if you number them as you go along, you can run into trouble if you start redrafting and moving paragraphs around. Seems like a little thing, but it definitely creates problems even for those really big fancy law firms. I just went through some extended litigation against one of Burlington's largest law firms, and we got into chuckles with one another, pointing out our errors in numbering our paragraphs in various documents. Next thing you'll do is draft the facts. Now, there's a little bit of a style point here. Some attorneys draft the facts of a complaint under a separate subhead of their own, and others put each set of relevant facts under each count or legal claim to which they are relevant. It sort of depends on the nature of the complaint and how long it is, but regardless of where you put those facts, be sure to keep one small point per numbered sentence or paragraph. When the other side files their answer, they'll have to admit or deny each paragraph in your complaint. So having the facts split up into tiny bits helps you learn about which facts that you agree on and which you disagree on. And here is an example of the set of facts that I drafted up, continuing on with the saga of the cut-rate chair company barber chairs and their purchase by Reginald Taylor Barber. Next, we come to the counts, and you should certainly feel free to just pause this video to read any of these documents as we go if you would like. Each individual legal claim has to be set out as a separate count in your complaint. A complaint may have one count or hundreds. Very few have just one. There's usually at least two that you can come up with. But they can run from being a couple pages to hundreds and hundreds of pages with lots of different counts. Each count starts with a numbered legalese paragraph that adopts all the prior paragraphs into that count. That's one of those archaic legal traditions, but it's part of the formal legal drafting process. And you'll see that on the next slide where I set out 2 counts. Here you see, continuing on with the saga of the super great barber chairs, count 1, breach of contract, and count 2, breach of warranty. Each starts by saying, plaintiff repeats and realleges paragraphs 1 through whatever the paragraph was that you stopped at, above as though more fully recounted herein. And each one ends with a statement regarding that particular claim. So you see the breach of contract claim starts with that repeat and reallege paragraph. And then paragraph 20 says that accordingly defendant has breached its contract. So that's where you actually conclude each count with the legal claim you're making. Then lastly, we get to the request for relief. Archaically, again, that's called a prayer for relief, but most attorneys have dropped that, call it a request. That's the actions you want the court to take. Be sure to include a final catch-all request of any other relief as the court deems appropriate. And ask for a jury trial if one is allowed and if you want one, and end with the appropriate signature block. And there is our last slide, a request for relief. You'll see these paragraphs are lettered. The plaintiff respectfully requests that the court and then declare that they breached the contract, declare they breach warranty, that is, side with you on each of your legal counts. And then what you've asked for here, either ask for an injunction or a court order that they deliver the right chairs, or that they return the money, and then award their other expenses, and issue such other relief as the court may deem just, proper, and equitable, and the jury trial request is stated there.